Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Extra Shift. I'm Chris here, as always, with Brendan. How we going?
Pretty good. Yeah, all things considered, it was an interesting deadline. There was some...
Don't know what you're talking about.
Still, towards the end of it. I was kind of, look, every year we talk about, like, oh, is it going to flame out? Is it going to be like, on the last day, there's nothing but like, B-grade deals to be had. But look, I think we've got some interesting stuff to talk about. This is episode 203, and it is the post-trade deadline episode for the 2023-24 season. So let's get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it. Now, first of all, I've with numbers, obviously, for me, Mark Bergevin's there. Like, this is, again, me. I like looking through the people in front offices who are in numbers. So that's great. Again, when you're looking through the numbers and looking for a really sort of well-known and much loved three, I think about San Jose Sharks legend Rob Davidson. From 2008 San Jose Sharks, number 3, always in our hearts. No, got nothing. But
yeah, look, it's we're still in the defenseman numbers. It's what you're gonna get with that. Special place in my heart, Olli Mata. From the Penguins Cup runs. But
I like the way we're talking about those. We're like ignoring like the really like Chara.
Obviously there's
Tim Horton when he played for the Rangers, or Toronto legend Justin Holl.
We've done it a couple of times around.
What they wouldn't give for Justin Holl in the lineup right now, by the way, like seriously, all of that bagging out about how terrible Justin Holl was, they would love him in there right now. But more importantly, and this is becoming very quickly a favorite segment of people, it's the Chris gives Brendan random stats relating to the number. So episode 200.
I'm going to guess one day.
Episode 203. And this is really going to be a shot in the dark because we had to stretch for this one. One club in the NHL has, at this point in time, 203 overtime losses.
Oh.
Okay, so
200. Does this include the playoffs? I imagine it would, because at a certain point in time, there wasn't like overtime in the regular season.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. I think this is just regular season.
Just regular
season overtime losses, 203.
Oh, okay.
And that places them 4th all time on the overtime losses. Okay. Now, again, you can always ask for one clue.
All right.
I'll find one clue.
Oh, all right. What should I ask for? Because look, in my mind, like, it could be anyone at this point in time, considering that with the amount of time that teams have been in the league and so forth. It's probably not one of the brand new teams.
So, interestingly enough, just to sort of not give it away, but give you a bit of a tip, you would think that, but on this list, the top 3 are all new teams. Now that means non-original 6.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the thing. Is like we're probably largely talking about like 3-on-3 overtime and so forth, because that's going to be the bulk of like overtime games in the last few years, and that it's probably not going to be Seattle being the newest team, but like everyone else was kind of in the league, I think, by the time that came in. So I'm going to take a swing in the dark and ask for.
You want a clue, or are you going to swing?
I know. I think I need a clue, because at the moment I'm just randomly guessing a team.
Original 6.
Yeah, I was gonna. More or less, that's what I was going to ask. Was it what kind of era of?
It's original 6.
Okay. Teams that blew it, and like this feels Toronto to me.
Incorrect. The answer is the Detroit Red Wings with 203 regular season overtime losses. Now, Florida is first on that list with 222. Then Philadelphia at 207, Anaheim at 206, then the Red Wings, then the Bruins, then the Canadiens, then the Sharks, then the Leafs, then the Blackhawks.
Okay. I mean, it felt fitting. Maybe that's a recency bias thing of them, like, blowing games and losing, but. Yeah. Okay. I had a 1 in 6 chance.
Look, you didn't look, and again, it's interesting that a lot of the stats we've used, like obviously this is only the third one, but a lot of the two stats here, two of the three stats have been Blackhawks. So I think we get a lot of not Blackhawks, Red Wings. So we're going to get a lot of Red Wings, I think, early because they've got the numbers. So, all right, let's get into the signing, shall we? Before we get into the trade deadline and
very very quickly, let's hammer through these.
So Elias Pettersson finally happens in Vancouver. 8 years, 11.6 AAV, or as everyone pointed out on Twitter, basically the Nylander contract.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone was getting a little paranoid that it was going to be over 12 or 13 or whatever because he's ostensibly a center. They haven't been having him take a lot of face-offs over the last few years, but at the moment he's kind of been actually playing center, there's that kind of extra rate for that position, all that kind of stuff. The huge breakout that he's had in the last couple of years. But yeah, very very reasonable contract I feel like for Vancouver at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think they did well. I think they did really well in this one. 11.6 is a good deal for
especially after bridging him. They gave him that short bridge contract when they were having to re-sign him and Hughes a couple of years back. I was expecting him to really cash in after that. So to buy essentially his age 26 to 34 years at that, I think that's very good.
And what I think they've done really well there too now is that when we talked about this, we criticised them at the time for the way they were doing the signings, but they're going to have some interesting discussions in the off season when they've got to fill gaps in this roster now. But they got Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson both done, and they got Quinn Hughes at a really good price, 7.85. His next contract's not going to look vaguely like that. And Elias Pettersson at 11.6. That's good work. They've done quite well there. Now again, they're going to have a lot of gaps to fill going forward, and they've got a couple of players coming off, basically all of their defensive cores coming off the books next year. And they've got Elias Lindholm, Teddy Bluger, and Sam Lafferty. So nothing coming off the books that you go crippling. So that's fine in terms of the offense. Defensively, they've got everyone coming off the books. But that's a good thing because the Tyler Myers contract finally goes away.
Yeah.
And, I think Vancouver fans will rejoice at the Tyler Myers contract disappearing because that $6 million is not good. So
yeah, I mean, look what we know about NHL teams when all of a sudden they get a shitload of cap spaces. They don't always spend it wisely. So I'm curious to see how Jim Rutherford, fills that roster out. But
I love the way as what we both just up. It's Jim Rutherford. We ignore Patrick Alvin because we don't necessarily. Patrick Alvin is a lovely figurehead, but Jim Rutherford's making the moves. This is all Jim. We've said this before, and we'll say it again. Patrick Alvin doesn't do anything without knocking on the door and going, Jim. I was thinking, can we do, or actually probably more likely, Jim Rutherford knocks on the door and goes, Patrick, you will be announcing the following. I feel like that's probably closer to how it goes. But look, we'll give Vancouver their flowers. I think it's a really good contract. Seattle, Jordan Eberle gets 2 years at $4.75 million, and fine.
Look, it's another couple of years for Eberle there, who's at this point in his career still serviceable, but not exactly a young player anymore. I'm not 100% sure if this is going to provide full value at that rate over the last couple of years. What is he, 36 now or something?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
But I think it's look, it's a decent signing in terms of it's well in Seattle. He gives them that veteran experience, and I love the fact we're now at the point where we're talking about Jordan Eberle as veteran experience because I still remember him coming into the league. But the idea of Eberle getting that extension, it's he does what you should do at that age. He's going into his 34 and 35 seasons on that contract. From 5 million, 5.5 to 4.75, that's a nice little step down. Gives them a bit of freedom. They've got a couple of RFAs like Yamamoto's RFA, Tolvanen's an RFA, Matty Beniers. That contract's going to be nice and simple. But they've got 22 million to play with now for those free agents. They'll be fine. And it gives them that leadership, and he gives them some depth points. It's like he's not doing badly.
No. At times he's been pretty productive still.
Florida, Gustav Forsling, 8 years at 5.75.
Yeah, I mean, I think Forsling's done really well to kind of make a bit of a career for himself after there was a lot of mentions after this deal was announced that at one point in time he was a waiver pickup and has kind of been able to flex his offensive chops on Florida and at times top that first power play and really kind of be a useful contributor for them. Congrats to him for the 8-year deal.
He's done really well, and he's performing really well on a team that's performing really well. So more power to him. And again, that's a demonstration as well. And you talk about this a little bit where we talk about teams looking for value, and a waiver claim turning into what he has become in Florida. Great. That's the sort of pickup you want general managers to make. That's the sort of move you want general managers to scope out and go, that's it. So that's a really good pickup. It's a really good signing. And then the re-signing is, he's earned that contract, and it's not an egregious contract. It also makes him their longest tenured defenseman in terms of going forward. Because the Ekblad contract is up for his renewal in 2 years' time. Braden Montour in the off season, he's a UFA. The Ekman Larson deal's up. Kulikov's up. They've got some defense to re-sign. Forsling goes, well, I've got my bag, so I'm good. Florida's interesting too because we talk about teams that have got to look forward and work out what they're going to do. Florida's got a lot of UFAs in the off season, tons of UFAs.
Yeah,
21 million in cap, but they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 11 UFAs on the books, and Antoine Liddell and Josh Mahura as RFAs. So they've got some stuff to do. Look, this is definitely, and especially when we get to talking about their trade deadline, this is Florida going for it. They're gone, and they've got nothing in the cabinet. They've burned first and second round picks this year and first next year, and they've got nothing left. So Florida has decided they're making their run now, and the contract situation kind of reflects that. Washington re-signed Rasmus Sandin 5 years at 4.6 mil. I still remain baffled that Toronto moved Sandin to Washington. I don't understand.
Yeah, it's interesting. They really kind of gave up on him. I feel like he's been poisoned a little bit by that media kind of.
They're forever looking for quality defensemen, and they had Rasmus Sandin and traded him because they wanted to get bigger and bulkier. Sandin's been good.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's an opportunity thing in Washington that maybe he didn't necessarily have in Toronto as well. I
think Keith stopped trusting him, and
but he fit in during extended period when John Carlson was injured and was quarterbacking top power play and doing a lot of stuff or whatever that probably gave him a lot more value to them than he necessarily had on Toronto, which I don't think he really got those opportunities as much. Look, it's nice to see him find somewhere that his skill set is appreciated.
As much as we've talked about, I like a lot of the stuff that Keith does. I really think that there might be one of the epilogues to his period in Toronto might be the number of really good pickups around the league that the sentence is, well, Keith stopped trusting him. And I'm starting, I think a narrative, it's really interesting because I think that there's a lot of narratives, obviously, within Toronto. We'll talk about it more when we get to their trade deadline acquisitions. But I think one of the narratives that isn't spoken about in Toronto, largely because it's the media, is that I don't think there's a coach that listens to the media more than Keith. I think Keith tends to sway depending on the media is telling him he should do something. And then he likes to appeal a bit like a hard ass, but then he'll just do it. And claim it was his idea. And I don't think there's a coach that listens to that outside noise more. And in a market like Toronto, that's not good. You need a hard ass who's just going to stand there and go, I'm not listening to you. I'm doing what I'm doing. So, and I think that the Sandin thing is kind of one of those. I think he listened too much to the outside noise on that one. Nashville, Tommy Novak, 3 years at 3.5.
Yeah, a nice little deal. I know that he's one of the favorites of some people like Dim Filipovic and so forth. A nice little deal for them to figure that sorted.
I loved I actually love Barry Trotz's deadline was hilarious, by the way, as well. Because first of all, rather than lots of trades, he made a lot of extensions instead. You know, he re-signed a bunch of other players. He also extended Mark Jankowski and Dante Fabro as well while he was at it. So he had a busy period of time. And just sort of the way he was talking about for the deadline, my favorite quote was, "The prices are ridiculous for what general managers are asking for players for rental and all that. But I'm a rookie GM, so I don't know a lot." And I love Barry Trotz playing rookie GM card. It was so beautiful. Like, I don't know what I'm doing in this. I'm just a rookie. And it's like, Barry, come on, you can't get away with that. Like, you know how the market works. But I do like the fact that Nashville's strategy, and we talked about buyers, sellers, and stuff like that. We thought Nashville would probably end up being a big seller, and they really weren't. But what I thought that he did was very clever. I said everyone else went off and traded and maybe overpaid or underpaid. Well, mostly overpaid for things. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Barry Trotz's answer was, I like these pieces that I've got. My deadline acquisitions, it's going to be to re-sign them all. So I know what I've got. And that, I think, is smart because Nashville's not in a we have to make moves situation now.
Yeah.
But it now positions his off-season. So he knows what that roster definitely looks like.
Yeah, there's a benefit to knowing exactly what cap space you've got over the next few years, or exactly what pieces you've got to move, all that kind of thing. Yeah, for
and
sure.
It's very Barry Trotz. Like, as a coach, one of the things you'd get with Barry Trotz is Trotz would know what his lineup was going to be, know where every player was going to fit into that lineup, what their role was and what their responsibility was. And that's what he's doing as a general manager. He's doing the exact same methodical planning that you got for Coach Barry Trotz as a general manager. It's like,
to be fair, I think all management teams do that to some degree.
You want to bet? You want to bet?
Or at least that's what their job is. That's what their job is.
That's what that's the ideal.
Yeah.
But I think Trotz is doing it. Like, there's a lot of teams that aren't doing it. We'll get there. So let's get into the trade deadline, shall we? Because, we'll start. We're going to go down. We're going to talk mostly about the buyers, although a couple of sellers are going to pop up. But we're going to talk about the buyers and the big buyers and what moves they made. So we're going to start with Boston. Andrew Peake and Patrick Maroon come in. Now, not massive amounts going out either. That's the more important part of this for Boston. So Jakob Zboril and Luke how did I get Zboril right?
Toporowski.
Toporowski, I got wrong. And it's a third round pick in 2027 for the Zboril trade to Columbus, and it's a 2026 sixth round conditional. And the conditional pick is that if Patrick Maroon plays a playoff game, Minnesota get the pick.
So I mean, obviously adding some depth there, just kind of bolstering that roster. It's an interesting choice that they didn't kind of make a big swing. I think we'd some people probably expected them to go out and buy a big forward or something like that to try and bolster their chances, but it's probably a little bit found money for them this year, realistically.
Yeah, I feel like, so this is the thing with Boston. We talked about the fact we expected a massive drop-off. And look, they started white hot again, then have had the sort of bit of a drop-off and bit of a stumble, which you would expect. But they're easily going to make the playoffs. They're going to be fine. And, I think the idea of Boston is the example of we don't really expect this to be the year. So why would we mortgage the farm on this one? We're going to just hold firm, stick to what we've got, see how far it gets us, look at the deadline, look at the off-season as well, see what's available to us in the off-season, because there are going to be a lot of free agents popping up in the off-season, a lot of free agents, and there's more cap. So I think for Boston, it's a case of we can hold. Now Boston is interesting because Boston don't have their first, second, or third this year. Boston aren't drafting until the fourth round. So that's an interesting thing. One of the reasons why they didn't mortgage the farm was they couldn't, but I don't think they would have, even if they could have. I think that their idea, Boston's idea, I think this year is going to be free agency and be Boston, lure players to Boston in free agency. That's what they do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think it makes sense. I wouldn't expect them to mortgage the farm at this point of their cycle. So reasonable little pickups. I did see an amusing kind of quote from Pat Maroon saying that he thinks everyone hates him there. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, Pat Maroon. Everyone hates Pat Maroon everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of I guess his job, and in terms of I'm sure that they'll have him there.
If he'd been traded to if he'd been traded to Toronto, then he really could have said it, because definitely no love lost to Patrick Maroon in Toronto. So Calgary were fascinating because we were trying to work out what Calgary were going to do, and we had like massive sellers, and I don't understand what they did. I don't quite grasp it.
I mean, I wouldn't maybe necessarily list them as buyers in terms of what they did, but they were definitely active, and in that regard, I kind of wanted to mention them in this conversation. They made some acquisitions. They're not maybe big,
but they made a lot in terms of so. We'll mention this one in a little bit more depth later. I wonder if you can work out why. Nikita Okhotyuk from San Jose for a 5th round conditional pick. The condition is they get the best of the 5th rounders. That's the condition. So, and it's the other ones are Riley Damani from Dallas for Matthias Pettersson. And then the 3-way trade.
Yeah.
Which was a 3-way trade basically so that Noah Hannafin could find himself in Vegas. So Daniel Miramanov, it's a decent pickup for them. 2025 3rd round conditional, 2026 1st round conditional from Vegas. Philadelphia got Hannafin and then retained, and they got a 5th round pick from Vegas for that, and then Vegas got Hannafin at 50% retained.
Yeah.
And Vorboyov, but that's just a make weight. Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like, Hannafin, I think, was for some reason, the defenseman on the market that everyone was salivating over. In terms of, a deadline pickup, I can see, that being a attractive, consideration. I think he, we'll talk about Vegas a lot more in terms of the big moves and stuff that they made. But, essentially he was the best defenseman available in, at the deadline at this point in time. So, it didn't make sense necessarily for Calgary to hang on to them. I think that they did, reasonably well out of it, considering probably there wasn't a heap of teams that could necessarily take on that, that cap hit and that contract.
Yeah, they got some decent assets back. Now, it's the conditions on their picks, by the way, are that the 3rd round pick in 2025 becomes the 2nd if Vegas win a playoff round. So it's, and then the other one is as well that the condition on the 1st is that if traded by March 10th, 2024, or the pick is top 10, Calgary gets the 2026 1st round Vegas pick.
Yeah, and they did end up trading that pick, so it is going to be the 2026.
So it is the 2020. Yes, exactly. So, look, Calgary, they bring in some players. Nikita Okhotyuk, I was miffed about that one, and I wasn't necessarily thrilled about that one from San Jose. But again, most people watching this who know where we're going with this know that that's not going to be the thing I'm going to be really angry about. I do feel like that is a weird one, though, because we're now handing out the pieces of our big trade last year, who were supposed to be the pieces going forward. Okhotyuk he's been in and out of the lineup. It was like, yep, he's definitely going to find himself in that lineup. He's definitely going to find himself in that lineup. The fact that he can't find himself in that Sharks lineup, there's some questions to be asked, and most of them are of David Quinn. But again, she coming. Carolina. Yeah. So Carolina go out and get Evgeny Kuznetsov.
This was an interesting one because, between the last time we talked, Kuznetsov returned from the player assistance program. He went on waivers and reported to the Hershey Bears and played in the AHL. and then shortly after coming into this deadline was traded. So he still has next year on his contract as well. So the Capitals are retaining 50% of that contract next year as well. It's clearly a bit of a fresh start thing for Kuznetsov in this situation. Whether or not he'll ever get back to the player that he was at that particular kind of point in his career, I'm not too sure. But basically, to get him at just under $4 million for the Hurricanes, and I'm assuming that maybe they'll play him on a wing. I'm not too sure how that's going to work out, but
it's Carolina. They'll just throw them all in a lineup and hope.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how that works out for him. I hope he can kind of get back on track and turn his career.
The other one that I'm waiting for from you, which is Jake Gensel. So yes. Gensel with $1.5 million retained, and Ty Smith go to the Hurricanes for Michael Bunting, Pomeranov, Lucius, and Colvinen. The 2024 second rounder, which is conditional. If Carolina make it to the Stanley Cup final, it becomes a first. And a 2024 fifth, which is conditional, which is they only get it if Pittsburgh only get it if Carolina win the cup.
Yeah.
So my first thought before you get there is that I don't care where you are in the NHL. I don't care what is happening in the NHL. But Kyle Dubas will get Michael Bunting on his team.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one because we talked about Hanifin kind of being like the top D available in the at the deadline, and Gensel was despite being injured was very much the top forward available at the deadline in terms of his pedigree, his scoring, etc. Yeah, look, I'm not going to say that I was happy with this when I first saw it. We'd heard from Dubas earlier in the week that they planned to make this deal early. They were originally trying to make this a deal for Gensel by Wednesday. That passed. Obviously, it ended up being relatively late in the process, and I'm guessing that really, like, my guess is that he didn't really kind of get the offers that he was wanting, because we were hearing from him that he wanted quality over quantity. It wasn't so much a matter of getting like a broad variety of assets back, which is essentially what he got back in the end. They were hoping for, some kind of, high, first round picks, some kind of, actual, stud prospect, rather than a bunch of, B grade prospects. These were essentially like the maybe, sixth, seventh, fifth, like best prospects, whatever, in Carolina's system. They probably come in and become like about the third or fourth best prospects in the Penguins system, which bumps them up from being one of the worst systems in the league to kind of somewhere being 20 somethings, 22nd-ish, I think I saw on Scouting's rankings. But basically it doesn't move the needle from a significant standpoint in terms of quality assets for the Penguins. But I'm guessing that really he wasn't actually kind of getting the quality of assets back that he was expecting. And if we look at the deadline in general, it wasn't like there were any super stud prospects being moved or any kind of really high first round picks. For the most part, they're all first round picks in the late 20s. You would expect. So I guess the quality wasn't necessarily there. In terms of what they did get back, Bunting, I think, is a better stylistic fit for Pittsburgh than he was for Carolina, where it really kind of wasn't working out for him this year. So I'll be interested to see how he fits into that lineup. It could end up being a decent fit. I'm not excited about him being a huge part of that return, but in terms of the prospects that they got back, I've heard some good things about Koivunen. He could potentially play in the NHL next year, or is probably the closest of some of those. It's not an impressive return package, but it's also worthwhile noting that this was a deal for a rental. This was, not including an extension, and there's no guarantee from Gensel that he does extend in Carolina and could still be going to free agency. And honestly, could theoretically end up back on the. I wouldn't expect it necessarily. I don't think that the chances of that are, a lock or anything. But if it ends up being like well, he comes back in in a month's time or whatever and re-signs with the Penguins, then it's a significantly better return than than it was previously. But again, disappointing considering this was the one real kind of chip that they had to try and bolster their closet. But we have seen a quote from Dubas post this trade talking about they're still committed at this point in time to trying to compete and retool over the next couple of years, and they were talking about they were in some discussions previously where they just really didn't have the pieces required to make deals for young players that they wanted, and this gives them some of those pieces to potentially include in some trades in the future. So I would expect to see a busy off season for Dubas
and that's
sculpt this team a little more.
That's a very FSG way of doing business too, is going, we don't necessarily have the ability to go out and get the bits we want now. But what we're going to do is we're going to put systems in place to make sure that those pieces exist so we can. FSG's model, and again, knowing this from Liverpool, is that FSG's model is always about building value and building to what you want long term and not rushing to get a piece. Yeah. And again, they do it differently in each sport. Like they did it with Boston, with the Red Sox. They didn't rush out and sign a million pieces immediately. They built and went, we are prepared to put the graft in here. With Liverpool, when they did it, they got the manager in place. They got the system in place above it. They built the structure, then went, now we're going to focus on the on-field product and get all of that in place. And they're currently in the process of, with Liverpool, they're replacing, an iconic legendary manager who's about to leave the club at the end of the season. And they're actually going back to the guy who built the system at Liverpool and rebuilding the top structures so the club is secured before they then look at back down. It's the same sort of thing here. And that's why I said at the time when Dubas went there, Dubas fits FSG like a glove because it's about develop your structures, develop your processes, put your pieces in place, then build everything else. And that will frustrate people in the NHL who are not used to that idea of, it's quick turnaround, quick wins. And part of the problem is that they're doing this with Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin running down, the end of their careers.
Yeah, the last couple of years of their deals. I mean, I wouldn't expect almost any of these guys realistically to play any kind of significant.
But they're all pieces that are going to be swung.
Yeah, they'll probably get moved in the next, 12 to 24 months.
I think Wheeler Dealer, if you thought that Wheeler Dealer Dubas in Toronto at the draft was something, I think Wheeler Dealer Dubas for Pittsburgh is going to be something else entirely. I think you're going to be seeing players that you don't know exist move. And they're going what I think you might see, it might get a little bit my GM or general manager mode from NHL, where he swings for one piece and then swings that piece immediately for another piece and builds his way up. So I think whereas he would trade back in Toronto and pull himself back to get a haul of picks, I think you might see the reverse in Pittsburgh where he starts trading up and moving a couple of pieces to get to the next level and then a couple of those pieces to get to the next level. And I think that's what you're going to see with Dubas here. So it makes sense to me. But from the Carolina side of things, Kuznetsov, Gensel,
I mean, I think Gensel is an incredible fit for Carolina in the terms of the way they play and so forth. He should be back within the next week or two, I think. I think that's really the best addition they could have made for this Carolina team. I can't say I'm excited to see Gensel playing for another team, but I do think he'll fit in really well there.
Yeah, I think that'll be, and also the 2026 sixth rounder to Toronto for Cade Weber. Cade Weber, as we'll get to Toronto in a minute, we'll talk about this more in Toronto, but part of the Toronto we're really big push.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded like a player that they weren't either couldn't sign or weren't necessarily, expecting to.
Which is largely what Toronto signed, but we'll get to Toronto in a minute.
Yeah.
Colorado. So Colorado had a couple of intriguing moves. I'm going to sort of start with the two moves that are probably the biggest. I'm going to start with those instead.
Yeah.
We asked on the last one, which was the preview for the deadline. My big question was, who's going to overpay for Sean Walker? Yeah. And why is it the Toronto Maple Leafs? And it turns out, no, it's the Colorado Avalanche. Sean Walker and a 2026 fifth rounder from Philadelphia for Ryan Johansson and the 2025 first conditional, which is top 10 protected. Which obviously is
not going to end up in the top 10 because they're going to make playoffs. But
of all the teams that I expected to overpay for Sean Walker, I didn't have Colorado on my list. And the reason why that happened is the other move.
Yeah.
Bowen Byram to Buffalo for Casey Middlestat. Now,
yeah, this was, I think, the most interesting actual hockey trade to
my philosophy on this is that Colorado won the cup on the back of we've just got depth down the middle. Depth down the middle. And they're like, we'd like some depth down the middle. Casey Middlestat's depth down the middle. I don't know why you move Bowen Byram.
Look, I think that it's kind of somewhat fallen out of favor to some degree in Colorado over the last few years. You know, they ended up with, you know, Colorado at one point in time, you know, had this absolute like treasure chest of defensive prospects that, you know, not every one of them necessarily, you know, flourished into being the, you know, the piece that they were kind of expecting it to be. You know, it kind of looked like at one point in time they had like 4 first pair defensemen kind of thing, and that, and I don't think that necessarily has been kind of where Bowen Byram has ended up in terms of his career. Maybe some portion of that is opportunity because of the, you know, the quality of, you know, defensemen already on the Colorado blue line, that he wasn't necessarily getting the, you know, the opportunity that he otherwise would have. I'm excited to kind of see if he can kind of turn that around and turn into the, you know, the player who, you know, he was kind of hoped to be in Buffalo, because at this point in his career for Colorado, apart from obviously all the injuries and stuff, like, you know, he at this point in time, this season is his, you know, highest games played in a season at 57. He's up to, you know, so before that, 42 was his, you know, career higher in games played. So, you know, still a very young player, still, you know, a lot of potential there, still could absolutely flourish into, you know, who he was expected to be. But
I genuinely think it's an absolutely brilliant pickup for Buffalo. And again, he made a good impression in his first game with a goal and an assist in his first game to start off with. Okay. Like that was a good little start for him. Look, I think that Byram, you know, we've talked a little bit about Buffalo, and the idea of Buffalo being, you know, a team that's always like they're looking like they're on the up. They're looking like they're on the up. If you've got a defensive core that you're building, and you've got Rasmus Dahlin, you've got Bowen Byram, you've got Henry Hikaru, and you've got Owen Power. That's a good little core that you've got to fall.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's significantly improved, but, you know, obviously, you know, I think Power is another one of those guys who hasn't maybe necessarily flourished into the player that they were hoping for either. So, yeah, look, I definitely like the fit for Buffalo. I think that, you know, he could, in greater opportunity, turn into, you know, something that he was expected to be there.
Yeah, I think from Buffalo's point of view, I think the next thing that Buffalo have to work out how to do is they have to work out who the hell would like Jeff Skinner. But that's their next big move. But the other one, the Sean Walker move for Ryan Johansson, for Colorado, I think that's an intriguing move. Obviously, then you've got to replace Byram. And Sean Walker was the right shot defenseman, bellow the ball, and I'm interested in the fact that they decided that that's what Walker was worth, especially given what the value for a lot of other players was. Johansson at first is an interesting move.
Well, I think that Johansson was by and large a dump.
Johansson's the dump. But
But to be clear about that, you know, he came in there at, you know, a budget deal with the expectation that maybe he could be a second line center for them, and it really didn't, I guess, work out for them in the way that they expected, and that's why they made that Middlestat trade.
I mean, probably their other really good pickup they made, which was a value pickup, was Yakov Trenton. And I like the Trenton pickup from Nashville. Trenton, you know, gives them some good depth. And I think that's a decent little move, and it was a third round pick.
They also acquired Brandon Johaim from Minnesota for a third as well as a depth, and Myers, I imagine, from the Ducks would probably be a potential black ace. For the
playoffs. that's the sort of aim there, and they didn't, and that's the thing, they didn't give up a lot of resources. They gave up a few thirds, but like then you said that first for Sean Walker, that's a gamble. Okay,
Not that they have a lot of resources to give
No,
up
they
at this point in time. They don't have any second or third round picks for
that's
the
why
next
I find
few
it
years.
fascinating they gave up the first because
Mm.
So Edmonton. So Edmonton made a couple of moves. Troy Stetcher for a 4th round pick 2027. That's a kick the can down the line one.
Yeah.
And then the three-way sort of move where they needed to get a bunch of cap retained. Sam Carrick and Adam Enrique come in via Tampa for a 2025 4th round from Edmonton, which is conditional. If they make the cup, it becomes a 2026. If Edmonton wins the cup, it becomes a 2026 4th, which is weird. If they win the cup, the pick gets bumped back. Interesting.
Yeah.
And then it's because the 4th goes to Anaheim, who get the 1st round pick 2024 Edmonton and the 2025 5th round, but they get the 4th round. It's
very complicated, but
like Sam Carrick and Adam Enrique pickups for Edmonton. They're certainly moves. They are certainly moves.
I mean, look, I like Henrique in terms of in terms of like a depth piece there.
I like the idea of
minutes in Anaheim for a while, and I think that he has a lot of flexibility and can play in the top 6 and so forth, and that's something that Edmonton could definitely benefit from.
I think the spend is big.
Yeah.
And that's
given the top 6 forwards available and stuff. It's not the flashiest, most exciting pickup, but it might be what they need.
Well, their idea with this is definitely that whole, as we've said nonstop, you can't win the cup if you're just trying to run Draisaitl and McDavid nonstop. You need them all there, and OEL's been decent for them and stuff like that. But adding Enrique and Carrick, the idea is more depth there. So I get the principle of it. I do question if they couldn't have made some better moves in terms of things they need to really shore up. Like, defensively could have been good. A goaltender would have been. Given that everyone was like, this is definitely where all the goaltenders are going. And basically nobody went, apart from a couple of swaps for goaltenders, which we'll come to. Edmonton's decision is we're just going to go complete offense. We're going to add as many offensive pieces as we can and just hope we don't get caught out by defense and goaltending in the playoffs. And I feel like I've seen this movie. I feel like I've watched this movie before. It might work out better this time. Who knows? But I'm whelmed. I'm not underwhelmed. I'm not overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's fine. I think they got what they needed, but maybe could have gone a little bit further.
Florida decided, meanwhile, that they were going to add. And so Florida went out, and so they got they added Magnus Hellberg for Weber in a 7th with Pittsburgh. They add Kyle Okposo, and they also add Vladimir Tarasenko. So I think that the Tarasenko pickup is really savvy.
I think that's the kind of star piece of their ads. He's already playing on the first line with Barkov and Reinhart, and he got a couple of points today. I think that's a really nice pickup for Florida as they become more and more Russian.
I like the Okposo move as well. Gives them some good depth. Tarasenko obviously is Tarasenko, and I feel like that Florida's made some very smart moves. They were a team that didn't need to make a lot, but then they could add from a position of strength, and they did. And they're good little deals. And they're not
given what they had to give up, very very good little deals for very little what they paid.
Yeah, conditional 4th that becomes a 3rd if they win, and a 3rd from 2025 for Tarasenko, and a prospect and a conditional 7th. That's nothing to get what they got.
Absolutely.
Nashville, as we said, Jason Zucker from Arizona for a 2024 6th. I was talking to Leah Merrill. We'll get her on the pod. We set up post deadline. So Leah Merrill from PHNX Sports. We'll get her and all the rest of the team on to do a bit of a what's going on in Arizona chat in a couple of weeks' time, hopefully. But I was sort of chatting with her, and they were very much, if you saw their last show, Not particularly thrilled with Arizona's deadline, which I get. They got
Mm.
they got pennies on the dollar back for most of the things they were trying to trade.
Yeah.
Jason Zucker to Nashville for a 2024 sixth. Like, and again, it feels very Barry Trotz. That feels
Yeah,
very
for sure. And look, I think probably not a heap of teams were able to take on the full, 5.3 mil on Zucker's contract. That probably came into it to some degree. But I mean, Zucker basically signed in Arizona with the intention of being traded to, a team for a playoff run.
Yep.
It was a 1-year deal at that kind of cap hit. I don't know necessarily why. They couldn't have retained 50% and sent them somewhere else that had I don't know if he had any, preferences of where he was going to end up. Maybe that played into it or something, but, not a big return for Zucker.
I mean, the thing is, he's going to get his playoff run because, like, the Preds are well and truly out in that fourth spot for the wild card. And so the Preds are making it. So it's a good little. And again, Anthony Beauvillier from Chicago for a 2024 fifth. Again, nice little pickup. Again, he's not really Trotz didn't overpay for anything. And more importantly, and because we talked about the idea of what they were going to do, more importantly, they hang on to the goaltending. They did not have to make that trade. And, they've done quite nicely there. And again, we talked about the idea of found money with Boston. This is a found money. I did put Nashville in my playoffs. So I picked that at the start of the season. But this is definitely a found money playoff run.
Yeah.
So the Rangers were busy. They were very busy. Jack Roslovic from Columbus for a 2026 fourth. Lots of conditionals this year. It goes to a third if they make it to the Stanley Cup and Roslovic plays in 50% of those games. Nick Patan back again. The other big one for me was the Wenberg signing, and it divisive within the Rangers community. I didn't mind it. I think it's a decent pickup for what the Rangers need. I think Roslovic and Wenberg, not the flashiest names, but I think they add what the Rangers kind of need.
Yeah.
They needed that depth in the middle with Wenberg. They get that. Roslovic gives them some really nice depth as well to help out, because they need some assistance there. So, I
mean, we did hear that they were in on Gensel at one point in time, but didn't want to pay the asking price, which I understand.
Well, Drury apparently was told that the price for the Rangers would be they needed to give up some top prospects, and Drury refused.
Yeah.
So, which I get. And look, it's very unlike the Rangers because when they brought Drury in that group, it was like, get rid of everyone who's young and good.
Yeah.
We want old guys. And then when they go, we want some of your prospects, and Drury goes, I'm not going to get rid of those.
Yeah, and I think probably part of it too was there was talk about like, they'll be sending Kaapo Kakko back or whatever, and I don't think that the value for him is really that high at this point in time.
No, exactly. But I like the Rangers moves. I think they're perfectly serviceable. They do exactly what the Rangers need. Again, we talked a lot about a couple of teams that have done exactly what they needed to do. I think the Rangers did exactly what they needed.
I think they got what they needed.
And I think Wenberg is a much better signing than a lot of people within the Rangers.
Yeah, Chad Ruhwedel, who they picked up, by the way, is the kind of quintessential, does exactly what you need. Defenseman. Like he's built in on the bottom pairing, or largely he is the seventh defenseman.
So the thing that I was looking forward to laughing about before the rest of the San Jose day unfolded, I was looking forward to laughing at the fact that Toronto for years have been in on Matt Dumba every trade deadline and haven't got him.
Yeah.
And in on Matt Dumba. And the year that Matt Dumba moves, he moves to Tampa, which is so Toronto. But look, it's not the Matt Dumba of previous years.
No.
2027 fifth rounder.
He hasn't been that name brand, Matt Dumba, for a few years.
2027 fifth rounder. And again, I know that in Arizona, they were very disappointed with that return.
They had to send back their seventh for that. So really what you're talking about is like a pick trade up of about a round and a half.
Yeah, 2 rounds up, or round and a half, really, for Matt Dumba. Yeah, it's not a great return for Arizona. As for Tampa, they'll plug Matt Dumba into a line, and no doubt he'll eliminate the Leafs in the playoffs. Also, Anthony Duclair leaves San Jose. He's been up and down all season, but knew exactly when to start scoring goals again by scoring them in the last couple of games before we traded him. But once again, we got a third-round pick from Tampa and a prospect which was described to me as a piece. And a 2025 7-rounder goes back. So, I mean, look, as long as it's not a trend of Mike Greer trading players and giving picks back to the other team, we're great. And I don't think that'll be a trend. I don't think he'll do that one again. Certainly not going to hear of that from Mike Greer again in this trade deadline.
Definitely not.
And then, obviously, the Adam Henrique is part of the stopover.
Yeah, it was interesting, I think, to me that Tampa was, taking on salary, as part of it.
We talked about the fact that we didn't think Tampa would do that because they couldn't.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm not quite sure what, I guess, just LTIR shenanigans, but the reality of, with Sergachev being out and so forth, allowed them to pick up a pick. So, look at a savvy little, use of that space if they weren't going to make a trade for a player.
Yeah, I don't think that fourth's going to be used by them. I think that fourth will be traded for something else closer to the draft. But Tampa did things. Toronto did not really do things, and now this is fascinating because I've greatly enjoyed watching the Toronto fan base rationalize this. And the rationalizations that I've seen have largely been, well, we've made big moves and that hasn't worked in the past, so maybe standing pat's the way to go. There were also, I've also seen a lot, and Bizinet got on and did the whole, I love this for Toronto. They're big, they're tough, they're menacing. 3/4 of the players that they signed aren't in the NHL at the moment, and if they were good enough, they would have been in the NHL. I think Toronto basically went and picked at the corners and the scraps and are hoping that somebody has an amazing run and therefore they look like geniuses. The Edmondson move, sure, a 2024 third and a 2025 fifth for Edmonton at 50% retained gives you an idea of where Toronto was shopping. The Ilya Lyubushkin move again.
Yeah, brought back a familiar player who will make the uncles happy.
They had to get that They had to get that retained, and they had to get that retained and pay a third and a sixth for the privilege. And then obviously the Cade Weber we mentioned before, and the Connor Dwyer from Minnesota for a fourth and a prospect. There's a lot of rationalization going on of this is exactly what Toronto needed because now they're bigger and scarier. I don't look at this and think Toronto is scary. And if you for 1 second believe that, for example, the Boston Bruins look at these trades and go, wow, we can't mess with Toronto in the playoffs, you are kidding yourself. You are absolutely fooling yourself if you think that any team is looking at this and going, well, that blue line just got scarier. They literally signed one defenseman because he's 6'5". And that's the point. He's 6'5". Okay.
And Lyubushkin immediately got injured in his first game.
Look, they are. This is for all of the crap that Dubas would cop about. Oh, you're just relying on the core four to go out and do this in the playoffs. This is Toronto saying we are relying on the core four to go out and do this in the playoffs. 100%. If they go on and have success in the playoffs, it's not these moves that have done it. It's the fact that they've got 4 players on those contracts.
Yeah.
That's what's done this. I think that the rationalization is hilarious because it's a fan base that demanded big moves and demanded that that's the only thing that would work. And when they didn't get them, then twisted themselves in not to say they didn't need them. So I think, and there's a lot of Calgary fans who looked at these moves and went, yeah, we've seen this movie. I've seen Brad do this, and welcome. You're going to have a lot of assets you can't move eventually. And that's the other interesting part of this too, is I don't think this was interesting from a Toronto Now perspective necessarily. I think Toronto's off season is going to be really interesting. I don't know what they're going to do. You can tell I'm stalling because we're getting to Vegas.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you straight up. We'll start with the Vegas side of things. I'm going to get to the last part of this at the end.
Yeah.
If you are angry at Vegas, if you are one of those people in the group who consistently goes, Vegas cheats. If you are one of those, Vegas can't do this, Vegas can't, the NHL only shut it down if a Canadian team did it. You wish your general manager was this smart. And I hate Vegas. Everyone knows I hate Vegas. But you wish your general manager had the balls to do this. You know why they don't do this in Toronto? You know why they don't do this in Montreal? Because the traditional hockey minds would absolutely rip them to pieces. But you know what they don't do in Montreal? And you know what they don't do in Toronto? Win Stanley Cups. Right? You want to win a Stanley Cup? The rules exist. You can go, they're not fair. Use the rules. Everyone in Toronto was perfectly fine when Robidar Island was invented to get all of their LTIR when they were trying to get themselves Austin Matthews. They were perfectly happy with Robidar Island. The second that other teams do this, this is cheating. This is cheating. If the Canadian team
how dare someone come into the league and try to win from the start and make every conceivable move, be aggressive, actually make trade deadlines interesting.
Did you see the McCrimmon answer when they said, why is it that players come to Vegas? Why are you able to make these moves? And his answer was, we pay.
Yeah. How fucking fun would it be to be a Vegas fan and from the very beginning, every single time your team is doing something interesting, every offseason, every trade deadline, your team is doing everything absolutely it can to put the best team on the ice that it possibly can.
Vegas is running they're running their front office like it's the NBA. And NBA teams look at winning and go, we'd like to win now. I've got a bunch of prospects. Don't care about the prospects. I'd like to win. So I'm going to move all of these prospects. Or this player's good, but this one's better. So I'm going to move this really good player for this better player. And, there was this whole mentality of, and this was a Brian Burke thing a couple of years ago, players don't want to go to Vegas because they're going to get flipped. If you go to Vegas and get a Stanley Cup and get flipped, you don't give a crap. You've got your ring. You've got your ring. And I think there's, again, what we're seeing is old school hockey mentality and sort of the way everything does work now, bashing into each other.
Yeah, it's not that Vegas is cheating; it's that everyone else isn't doing the work. Like we're so used to no one doing absolutely everything that they can that as soon as someone does it, we're like, what? You're allowed to do that? You're allowed to actually go out and be aggressive and do all these things and try to actually be an aggressive general manager.
So here's the other thing. The other thing about this is you're going to be fine. Stone is genuinely injured.
Yeah,
2 years in a row.
Lacerated spleen.
And I'm going to tell you, right, like he's not the player that he was because he's now 2 years in a row been he's genuine. Again, his spleen is lacerated. That's not a made up thing. No. If you are Toronto, for example, so I'll use the Toronto as an example because it's not to slate entire fan bases, but it's Toronto fans a lot of the time going, they're cheating. The problem is you have Ryan Reeves, who you put at one point on injured reserve because he just wasn't playing very well. And then Ryan Reeves went out in the media and said, I'm perfectly fine and healthy, and made them unscratch him and play him. Right? If Ryan Reeves went to Vegas and tried that, he'd be out the door. He was. That's what happened. Yeah. Right? If Toronto wanted to do this, John Tavares is pretty banged up.
Yeah.
You could throw John Tavares on LTIR, use that cap relief, and go out and get somebody. And the first day of the playoffs, bring Tavares back and go, oh, look, he's healthy again. Right? You could do that. Right? There is a risk that people don't understand with this idea of LTIR when they're like, oh, no, they're just cheating. Vegas at the time of doing this are looking outside. They're right on the cusp of the wild card at the minute. Now, they're going to make it quite easily. They're going to cruise into it. But there's a risk. When Tampa did it, like when everyone talks about that Tampa era, when you've got one of the best players in the league, and you are sitting them out, and then going to bring them back for LTIR relief at the end of that is a risk. Yeah, right? You are taking that risk, and one of the reasons,
a very good team to get away with this.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why certain teams don't do it is they are terrified that if they take that risk and it doesn't work, the media will absolutely shred them. It is not a coincidence that it is a market in Florida and a market in Vegas that do this successfully, because their media is not going to shred them. And I think that we talk a lot about players are scared of the Toronto media. Players are scared of the Montreal media. No. Front officers are scared of the Toronto and Montreal media. They are petrified. And I think it stops teams running effectively. Vegas's moves. Noah Hannafin comes in on a double retention, on a retention via Calgary, via Philadelphia. They go out then and they get Anthony Mantha, who, again, they get a 2024 second round pick and a 2026 fourth round pick. Then, before we get to this next one, anything you want to add on Vegas? Because I'm not going to stop after this.
Yeah, look, no, that's fair. Look, I'll let you run with this for a bit, because obviously there's a lot to talk about there. But in terms of adding Mantha, I think that's an interesting gamble for them. Mantha obviously, is one of those players that has shown some brilliance at times, but it's also gone long stretches being underwhelming and disappointing. He is just a rental for them. However, getting Mantha in at 2.85 is, I think, a good gamble for them in terms of their depth. And if they do manage to get several players back for the playoffs, he could end up being playing on their third line or lower. So I think that's a fine addition for them. I like the Hannafin fit, even if they can't afford to extend him, but I suspect that they made that kind of trade because they intend to extend him, and that is an improvement for their top 4D for the foreseeable future, not just for the short term. I suspect probably what this means in terms of the trades that they've made, and the one that we're about to talk about, is that some of their UFAs may end up walking away in the off season in terms of March or so, and maybe I don't know. I suspect that maybe they'll try and keep Stevenson, but Mantha's probably just a rental, and they'll try to find some way to retain some of these additions like Hannafin. I like that Vegas not only adds players for a run, but are also just consistently looking at ways to improve their team for the foreseeable future, and just continue to be an improving your team for the next few years, not just for a short-term run. And I think that kind of leads us into the big swing that they took, and the big surprise of the trade deadline.
Also, by the way, just before we do this, for all these people going, Vegas is cheating, look at their cap, Vegas is cheating, look at their cap. You know who has the most money on the salary cap at the moment? Toronto.
Yeah.
Vegas is third.
Almost everyone is over half of the league is over the cap on LTIR. This is just the reality of the fucking salary cap.
So again, just not to put too fine a point on it, but Vegas is at 92 million projected cap hit. Toronto is at 97. You're doing it wrong, Toronto. You are doing it wrong. If you are $97 million, what the hell are you doing? Seriously, that's stupid. Anyway, speaking of stupid, ready for this. I woke up in the morning and I'm like, okay, let's see what stupid moves people have used, because that's going to be hilarious. I can't wait to see who really traded something for nothing. And I opened Twitter, because I refused to call it the other name. And I opened Twitter, and I'm like, oh look, that's it. Oh, Vegas has made another. What do you mean, Thomas Hertl? We must have got a great return. What do you mean, Tom? And then I checked Drager's tweet, and I checked the first Drager tweet, where he included in parentheses "our," which means that someone from Vegas sent it to him directly, because he just copied and pasted it, and then redid the tweet, taking out our third round pick, our first round pick, and put in first round pick. So well done, Darren. In trying to be first. Yeah. You actually outed the fact that someone from Vegas's front office sent it to you directly.
Oh yeah, I mean, I saw a tweet saying this is word for word, an executive's,
It's because in parentheses it said our first rounder from and then he deleted it and put the new one up, but it keeps the old one there as this is a second version. The trade. Now, I spent a lot of time talking to a couple of Sharks fans in the group yesterday, because they were like, it's a decent return for what I went. You might want to read that again. Thomas Hertl, to Vegas, our really bitter hated rival.
The
We
team that we
suck.
hate the very most in the
We
whole
suck,
world.
but we absolutely can't stand Vegas. So it's a rivalry in so much as we can't stand each other. Thomas Hurdle with 1.387 500 retained, so that's 17.1% retained. A 2025 third and a 2027 third to Vegas for David Edstrom, their first rounder from last year, and a 2025 first round pick. Okay. So first of all, the Athletic, if you looked at their grades, graded this really good for San Jose because they're like, San Jose needs to trade Hurdle because he's starting to wane a little bit. He's still up there at the moment, but he's more injury prone, probably on the tail end of the contracts, probably on the tail end of all that stuff. So it's a smart move to move him, and Edstrom is a great prospect. Like, he's ranked as an A+ prospect. I reckon he'll be a first or a second line center is sort of where he's projected to go. Cool. Fantastic. Not an issue. First of all, we got a 2025 first. So it's not even useful at this year. Secondly, that pick's probably going to be a 28+ pick, let's face it.
Yeah.
Thirdly, we sent more assets back than we got for Thomas Hurdle, our first line center. We sent more assets back to Vegas to retain for the privilege of retention. We sent them more
for the next 6 years. For the next 6 years.
And when we talk about retention for San Jose and retention, we have now used all of our retention slots, all of them. And I'm not saying we've used them like they come off the books for the start of next. No. Brent Burns is the first one off the books, and the Brent Burns one comes off the books in 2025, 2026. So we've got another year of retention there. Now, that's not so much for the cap. That's more for the fact that we've got another year where we cannot retain salary. We still have Marc-Edouard Vlasic on the books until 2026, 2027 for $7 million. We've still got on the books our captain, Logan Couture, who is injured every time he looks at somebody, for $8 million until 2027, 2028. Those are the two contracts we should be trying to retain on, not a cap-controlled, contract-controlled, no-move clause Thomas Hurdle. Instead, we retain on Thomas Hurdle, give assets back for the privilege of it, get a prospect who may very well turn out to be good, a first next year, not this year, next year. And the other stupid part about this is that the Hurdle contract didn't need to be signed. Once we knew we were in a rebuild, and I blame Hasso Plattner for this, because Plattner does not want to acknowledge it is a rebuild. When Doug Wilson left, we had that weird period of time where Doug Wilson left. We didn't bring in another general manager, but Doug Wilson wasn't there. Joe Will was the acting general manager. They were never going to hire Joe Will as their general manager. Joe Will signed this contract. Right? We already had a bunch of contracts that were really overblown and stupid. Joe Will, as an acting general manager who was not going to be in the position long term, signed Thomas Hurdle to this contract when we knew we were going to rebuild. Probably should have flipped him at that point. We would have got a lot more assets at the time. Should have flipped Hurdle, get the assets back. No move clause, hamstring ourselves with that deal. Then don't hire the guy who signed that. Give it to a rookie general manager and go on, get out from under that if you don't want him. Having already got out from under Brent Burns, having then had to work out how to get out from under the Erik Karlsson trade, where we basically retained on both of those players. He does the same thing on a Thomas Hurdle, who he didn't need to move. There was no need to move him. And if you wanted to move him, surely you could have got a bidding war going where you get something back better than that. Instead, the asset management of San Jose is the problem. I like the player we get back. I'm not upset with the moving. I'm not upset with the moving of Hurdle. I kind of agree with moving Hurdle. I am really angry at the management for doing this. And it really puts a lot of fear into me as well, insofar as I've been convinced the whole way along that we're going to get to the end of this season, sack David Quinn, bring in a coach we want, or the other move I've suspected, which is Ryan Mafosky as moving up. I'm not convinced they're going to get rid of David Quinn. Like, I don't trust. My big problem is, and I talked to Brendan about this yesterday when this happened because he copped my rant. I don't think we talked about general managers have a plan. I don't think San Jose has a plan. I think their plan is we're going to get first overall in the draft. And that's their plan. And you can't rely on a draft lottery to be your plan because you may not win the draft lottery. And if you don't win the draft lottery, your whole plan's up in smoke. So I also think we're going to have a bit of a problem in terms of who San Jose get in the future, because I think everybody in the league looks at them as absolute fire. The Vlasic tweet afterwards, Vlasic, with the crying emoji, the sort of whispers were that everyone in the locker room was very pissed about the fact they moved Hurdle and didn't get the return. Like, I think they'd understand if you moved him but got something. We also made a move for Vitek Vanacek. We sent Kaapo Kähkönen out for Vitek Vanacek, who's not going to play.
Yeah, I don't get that one at all from San Jose's perspective either.
Like, we got Vanacek. Are we going to run with Vanacek as our starter next year? Are we going to run with Vanacek and Blackwood?
I'm guessing so, but I don't get why they did that. Why they made that swap?
I don't understand any of that. I think that I've been worried for a while now that also if we keep Quinn, my concern about keeping Quinn and my concern about this organization now is that if there's no plan, I think David Quinn would trade William Eklund. I 100% believe that. Eklund is good. Eklund is going to be very good. And I believe that David Quinn will trade him. And I think that Mike Greer would do it.
Yeah, I think just to go back to Hurdle, I think the one thing that I did see was that clearly Hurdle had been aware of this at least for a few days. There was talk about them not trading certain picks and so forth because of things that were kind of in talks there, and it sounded like he'd had like a few days to consider it because at this point in that contract, Hurdle has a full no-move clause. So he would have had to waive that no-move clause to move to Vegas. I do wonder if the limitation of that no-move clause, severely limited the amount of teams that they could move him to. Not that makes anything better about the shitty return and what they spend to get rid of him or anything like that. I still think that they should have waited at least until the off season to try and at least drum up some more interest from other teams. I don't know how many other teams were involved in this process, if at all. Clearly there were probably limited teams that Hurdle was willing to waive for, but I think that you could make a pitch to him for a handful of different contending teams in the off season when the cap is opening up that you could go to Florida, you could go to Boston, you could go to, a handful of other places or whatever that he could have potentially gone and been just as competitive. That I think is the most egregious thing to me is that, yes, there was certainly, no move protection there and maybe Hurdle, really wanted to live in Vegas. I don't know. I don't know if there's some other shoe's going to drop about that, but it's still a shitty.
It doesn't matter. He's on a no move clause and you control that contract. Thomas comes to you and goes, I want to go to a cup contender. You go, great, off season. If we don't get the value, we're not moving you now. We will move you in the off season when we can actually sit down and do some long.
It still doesn't mean pay for the privilege of getting rid of it.
but you don't do it and hamstring. So we've got technically two 2024 firsts, but if the Pittsburgh first is a top 10, that moves to 2025, right? So in a year where it's like we could really do with a couple of first round picks, we may only have ours. We're relying on the idea of the Devils making the Eastern Conference final to get another first. That's not happening. So that second is going to be a second. We've got only the Tampa third this year. We've got no thirds left because we traded them all. San Jose are coming out of this with nothing, realistically. They've got not much. And again, I value the player we're getting back, and I think that could be good. But this is a team that needs more than a centre. This is a team that needs more than a centre. And if they do happen to strike lucky and win the draft lottery, then, you know, we've already got Will Smith coming in and he's looking good. And Quentin Musty's been scoring like absolute crazy. So like they're both going to come in and it looks like they'll be decent for us. But if we hit on the first again and we happen to win the draft lottery, we've just got a player who's a really good prospect who would be a third line center. And again, not bad to have three great depth centers down the middle, but you could have got a lot more. And I think one of the things we're learning about Mike Greer as a general manager is the phrase, you could have got a lot more. The Timo Meier deal last year, I defended it largely on grounds. Now I'm looking at it and going, I think this is a pattern.
Yeah.
And you could have got more. We have traded away Thomas Hertel, and we have traded away Timo Meier, and the return is really bad. If you'd said 2 years ago that San Jose was going to trade Hertel and Meier away, you would have anticipated an absolute king's ransom back for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
What they've got back for it instead is realistically a pittance compared to what you would expect a team to be making those moves to get. So I think I think Hertel's a home run for Vegas. I think he will be absolutely perfect in that system. And I think he will play really well. He's injured at the minute, but again, I think he'll come back and play perfectly fine. I think that's a great move for Vegas, and the rebuild that was never going to happen in San Jose is now never going to end. And the other concern is the building at the moment is a third full, but they can't get anyone to go to San Jose games because why would you? And Hasso Plattner is reactive, and I worry that Hasso Plattner's reaction is going to be normally what he does is he threatens to move the team. He threatens that they're not going to spend more money. He then demands that his general manager goes out and signs somebody. And all of those things are bad options. So I kind of hope that Plattner was very much on board with all of this before it happened and is very much going, I'm prepared for the fact we're going to take a hit. But the amount of conversations that the organization is having about nobody being in the building worries me because they're bringing it up in the media. So anyway, Vegas, great moves. San Jose, absolute tire fire of an organization, and I'm absolutely raging. I don't know if you guessed, but I'm raging. Winnipeg.
Yes.
Winnipeg made some decent little moves. Tyler Toffoli. I can't believe that Tyler Toffoli, a 2024 third and a 2025 second. I know that they included like Sam Carrick and stuff like that in the Adam Henrique deal, but like, how did Tyler Toffoli go for that? And Henrique?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, look, I think Toffoli has been maybe a little bit disappointing in New Jersey in terms of.
But that's just everyone in New Jersey.
So I think that's what I was going to say. Literally, everyone in New Jersey has kind of been a little bit disappointing to compare.
The Fire Lindy rant is appropriate now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, it's still, a very serviceable player who can play in their middle six for Winnipeg. I think that, improves them a lot. They previously already picked up Monahan, who is, still on fire for them. How long that lasts in terms of his sudden resurgence, we'll see. But Colin Miller for a fourth. Like, I think that they kind of got, we talk about teams that kind of got what they wanted. I think that this is, the kind of depth additions that they wanted for a run. And they didn't really, pay the farm apart from the Monahan deal.
Winnipeg did well. Look, I think Winnipeg had a really, and Shannon will be thrilled to hear this, but I think Winnipeg did really well. I think they did exactly what they needed to do, got what they needed to get.
Well, while they're on this streak, write it out. Get what you can.
Now the Devils. Speaking of the Devils, we mentioned first of all the Capo Kakkonen for Vitek Vanacek move, which again, like San Jose got a seventh out of that. Wow, and not even a this year's seventh, a next year's. Why are we trading for next year's sevenths? Like a next year's next year.
Yeah.
We need some players. Anyway, Capo Kakkonen and then Jake Allen. And so, the Devils have now gone out and basically completely replaced their goaltending, not suggesting that that's the problem.
Yeah, that was an interesting one.
And one of them has turned up because Schmidt has apparently been sent down to the A, which means that they said that either Kakkonen or Allen is there and ready to play as of today. So
yeah, I mean, look, obviously, I like that New Jersey addressed their goaltending. I don't know if either of these are necessarily the answer, but I guess they're just going to keep rotating through.
And we did say that we thought Jake Allen would be a move. So
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Look at at the cap hit that they've got between the two of them. They're paying under $5 million for the two of them. If they can get serviceable goaltending out of them, that's really all that they need. The reality is that goaltending isn't entirely the only problem that with the Devils. They're also playing defensively pretty badly. But how much of that is overcorrecting for goaltending is another thing, because you get into this kind of vicious spiral when you have bad goaltending where the defensemen suddenly don't trust the goalie anymore, the goalie doesn't trust the defenseman, and all of a sudden you get totally out of sync. You start overcommitting to things that you shouldn't, and it just gets significantly worse. I'm not sure that anything is necessarily going to improve there until at least the off season, when they can kind of hit the reset button and try and get back on the same page between their goaltending and their defense. But we'll see what happens there. I don't think they're deals that they couldn't potentially get out of if they had to with the cap hit that they're at. So we'll see. I also am not sure if there's really going to be any huge exciting goaltender available for them in the off season either. So worst case scenario, maybe they just walk away from Karkinen and they try and sign someone else if they have to.
I think that San Jose were really, and again, he wouldn't have gone there because he came from there. But I think San Jose were really desperately, quietly hoping that Mackenzie Blackwood didn't get injured at the wrong time, because I feel like they would have been able to trade Blackwood and get something back for him. But he got injured at the wrong time, so Karkinen became the move. Also, can I just point out with the Devils that I think both San Jose and Timo Meier would completely like a redo on that trade. And the Devils, I think both sides want to redo on the Timo Meier trade.
Yeah, very much so.
Because Timo Meier has been not great.
No, he has not fit well in that.
He's got 33 points in 50 games, 17 goals. He's a minus 21. That's not to his expected level, that's for sure. I mean, look, kind of the reason why San Jose was desperate to move Meier at that deadline last year was we kind of suspected that he was going to drop off and that production wasn't going to stay. And that was why I was hoping that we'd get more than what we got. And we didn't get a lot. We give a lot. We don't get a lot.
And I do want to say finally, the biggest, I think, travesty of the deadline is that Phil Kessel, who'd been playing with Vancouver's AHL team and trying to, earn himself, an NHL contract just for the last few months of the season and another run, didn't get signed by Vancouver. They kind of said that it kind of didn't work out in terms of their cap and their opportunities and all that kind of stuff. But I feel bad for Phil, because I feel like if he'd known that this was coming, then maybe another team might have signed him on. Maybe if he had a little bit more time. Now he can still technically at this point in time sign for an NHL team, but he can't play in the playoffs because the deadline has passed. So I don't know whether or not that's something that he's actually interested in doing. But it's kind of really a soft retirement for Phil at this point in time. If he can't get a deal, that's probably it for him.
I feel really bad for him because, again, I think he had the opportunity to. I think he genuinely believed that Vancouver thing was going to happen.
I think he could have. Yeah, well, that's the thing. It felt like it was, a matter of time that they were going to get it done at the last minute, and then it didn't happen. And I think, I feel bad for him in that regard. Maybe I'm hoping that he doesn't feel hard done by because of that. I reckon that he could have gotten a deal with some team if he'd known.
I'm sure he's off enjoying some golf.
Or poker.
And that'll do us for this episode because, I've ranted enough. Thank you, everybody, for listening to me yell. Look, I think everyone anticipated it. I think people would have been disappointed had I not. Because this was always
coming. What we're here for.
This was always coming. And what are we here if not to entertain the masses? So thank you, everybody, for listening, watching, whatever you've happened to do. Please remember to reshare things if you like it. Whenever you see it, reshare it. We're on YouTube. We're on the Apple iTunes. We're on all of the things. We're on the apps, not the apps, but the apps. We're on all the things. This has also been live on Twitter. So we're live everywhere you want to be. So, and we will catch you all later.
See ya.